Welcome everyone to our Innovation X Roundtable on reimagining the retail economy from proximity to distance. Let me introduce our founding director and chief scientist, Ethlat Sidhu, who's going to kick us off today. Ethlat, please take it away.
Okay, great. Welcome everyone. So really excited, actually, I truly am excited to be hosting today's roundtable on reimagining the retail economy and of course, from proximity to distance. So I want to say a few words about, why we're hosting the roundtables and just let everybody know a little bit about the context here. So to start with, a lot of things have been changing in this last year, probably more change than probably any of us have seen in our lifetimes, all in 1 year. And that includes changes in health, changes in the economy, changes what people consume, how they consume things, just all of this change. And retail is a big part of our lives, and retail has seen, like variations of these changes. It's not that we don't consume anymore, but we definitely are consuming things differently. We've had a lot of digital acceleration, and the timing of all these changes, this is all open, but all this change also leads to opportunity. And we host these roundtables because we'd like to understand how the world is changing, and we'd like to focus on, we use this terminology, innovation that matters. These roundtables are to understand the innovation that is kind of very practical, that's happening around us. And we also use these roundtables like a mini advisory board session. So not only to understand that particular industry and what's happening there, but also to understand how, as the Satarja Center and how Berkeley can best engage in all of these changes, and how our students can best engage in all of these changes, who we should partner with and how we should collaborate, what kind of projects we should do, things along those lines. And so to help the panel out and for audience as well, I'm going to put up one slide that describes the center. Let me see if I can achieve that. Here we go. So this is very slow, but should be happening. Here we go. All right, so one slide to help the panel and everyone in the audience who's new to the center to know a little bit about what the center does. And so this is Satarja Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology. The mission of the center is to empower innovators to change the world. And then we put in positively change the world, because it turns out there's more than one way to change the world. And we have three main buckets of things that happen. One is that we have an entrepreneurial curriculum. We refer to it as courses in Berkeley Method of Entrepreneurship. And one of the aspects of that is that while students are working on their venture projects, we tend to be working on the personal development of those students, including the psychology aspects, such as their mindset, their behaviors, their ability to work with each other in teams, to form teams, to do all of those types of things. So that whole category of being able to actually be an entrepreneur inside and out is one category. A second category is what's under this column referred to as innovation engineering. These are all, I'm going to say, more technical project type of experiences, courses, labs in a way, X labs, and they follow a structure that sometimes we call it a collider type of lab, meaning a lot of mixing of different kinds of people around a particular technical topic. So we have, for example, DataX. This is a very applied data science type of course, almost a hacker's guide to data science. Many companies also participate in this platform. They bring their projects and data. Students bring their data science skills, even the tools that we're teaching and the skills that we're teaching. And we literally do hundreds of data science projects, everything that you can imagine, anything you can predict, classify, or basically uses data, which is a lot of things. We have a blockchain lab. We have a plant-based meat lab, same type of mixing of companies and people, Telco X. And in fact, we're making an even broader one called an Innovation X Lab. And some of the topics like future of retail and others can be projects in those courses. I would love to actually spend more time and tell everybody about that, but I think you got the idea, what is in this bucket. And the third bucket is how we engage with the rest of the world. So we have 15 global partners and many, many companies that work with us. And the things that we're learning in the first two buckets, we're also teaching and partnering and communicating into the rest of the world. So one example program is our Engineering Leadership Professional Program. Here we have the many of the innovative companies that you think of: Apple, Google, Yahoo, Network Appliances, Samsung, Cisco, so forth. Really now all over the world, they attend a program with us that is about 4.5 or 5 months long. And it's for engineering people, technical people who rise up and need broadening skill capabilities. But these are people who would not otherwise get an MBA. And so this is an alternative there. And we have many other kind of engagement models with all kinds of other people. Overall, that's roughly what the center is doing. And hopefully that's good background to both the panelists as well as everyone who is watching. Now, without really any further ado, I'm going to stop this share and hand it over to the panel and to the panel's lead, Keval Desai, who's actually on our board as well and has been a long time collaborator with the center. I'm gonna, I think for now, I just say Keval Desai of Interwest Partners, but I'll let you take it from here. This is a very exciting topic. A lot's been changing. Keval, please take over.
Thank you, Iklak, and hello everyone for coming to our panel today. Thank you for your time. Hopefully everybody is healthy and safe wherever you're dialing from. And as Iklak said, we are very excited to have an amazing set of industry leaders today on our panel to talk about this a very interesting topic, which is reimagination of retail. Let me just briefly introduce myself. First and foremost, I'm a Cal alum. So hopefully that itself is enough to be a panelist here. But I'm really honored to have a chance to moderate this discussion. For the last 30 years, I've been in Silicon Valley, mostly as an engineer, product manager, in a variety of tech companies. And over the last 8 years, I've shifted to investing in early stage startups. And I have a couple of companies in this category that we'll talk about later, but really excited to be here. I want to briefly talk about the framework today and how we're going to have this discussion. And as Iklak said, the topic really is the reimagination of retail and this concept of going from an economy of proximity where we do things in person, in presence of each other, to an economy of distance where we do things remotely or digitally. And that shift started 30 years ago, right? If you think about the IPOs of Amazon and eBay in the mid 90s, the reimagination of retail really started then. But if we look at the journey since then, over the last 20 years, e-commerce, digital penetration of retail still was in single digits. It wasn't really that much. And then something changed in the last 9 months where that penetration of digital has almost doubled. And some people say that what could have happened in the next 5 years has happened in the last 9 months. So we have seen an acceleration of digital, and obviously the catalyst has been COVID. We're going to hear from 3 panelists who are just absolutely the best leaders in terms of bringing a very interesting vantage point to that acceleration to digital. We have a company that's a global public company that's really a leader in fashion. We have a company that's a self-driving autonomous technology startup. And we have a company that's a platform for small local businesses. And so you can imagine the variety of perspectives and diversity that these speakers will have. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a minute. But just for our audience, if you want to, I want to just frame the discussion and give you sort of a roadmap for how we're going to spend the next 30 minutes or so. And I think the best way I can describe it is, think of this as a play in 3 acts. And the first act was that initial shock to our system, starting in February and all the way through June, where we got news of the virus. We saw the impact of the virus in our personal lives. The businesses were impacted, and we all had to react quickly to mitigate the initial impact. So we're going to talk about that phase. We're going to then move into phase 2, act 2, which is what we're living in today, which is the initial adjustment is behind us. We're now trying to manage our lives and businesses in a steady state fashion to the extent we can. And we're, making some innovations in our technology and business models. And it remains to be seen if some of these changes will be permanent or temporary. And then phase 3, the last act, is going to be what happens after we come out of this pandemic. And with the news of the first vaccine that's now on the market, we know that act 3 is going to happen. We can see it, the light at the end of the tunnel. We don't really know when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, but we're going to try and talk about that and sort of project some of the future things into this discussion. So with that said, I'm going to now hand it over to our panelists, and we'll start with Julie, and for each of them, we'll ask them to describe their professional backgrounds, their company, and also give us a view into that initial phase 1, that initial shock, and what you saw from your consumers, customers, and how you reacted to that. So Julie, please take it over.
Thanks, Keval. First of all, really nice to be here. Iklak, I was super inspired just to hear everything that is going on at this center. And I think there's a lot of possibilities and alignments just with the speed of innovation.
Can I interrupt you just to say that I'm very thankful that I accidentally wore my Lululemon shirt today.
You're looking really sharp. I like it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you inspired me to update my background. So, yeah.
Go.
Yeah. I'd love to connect offline and see how we can get more involved with the center. So I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Lululemon. We are a global technical apparel company. We're in 17 different countries. We have over 500 different stores around the world. We're in Asia Pacific, we're in Europe, North America, and we've been around for over 20 years now, and we're incredibly fast growing. I've been here 3.5 years, and I've been in many different retailers. I was at Nordstrom for 10 years. Just prior to this, I was the CIO at REI for 3 years. And I've just never seen anything like Lululemon when it comes to both the culture and the pace of innovation that's just part of the DNA. So as a technologist, it is just an incredible place to be. If you think about all the technology that is throughout the throughout the reach of retail. I think a lot of times when people think about retail, they don't really think about technology, but technology is just so integrated in our strategy. So when we think about where we want to go, it's 100% enabled by technology. All of the planning that we do of our products, the design of our products, that's technology. The supply chain, that's technology. Our websites, our corporate systems, there is such diversity in all of our technology. And what makes it also interesting is that most of the retail companies, besides those that are started from scratch, have legacy of technology. So there's lots and lots of different types of technologies involved. And so my job is global privacy officer. So making sure that we have a high degree of respect for the credit cards that we are taking and that we are protecting all of our guest information, and that we're enabling all of our educators, that's what we call our salespeople, to have everything that they need to serve our guests, and then everything that our guests, that's what we call our customers that shop with us, to get access to all of our products all over the globe. So there's tons and tons of technology in that. So in terms of, this year, 2020, a lot of change. So think of our stores in China, right? The virus, China, Hong Kong, we got early indicators, and we had to shut down our stores then. And then here we are in March. Our headquarters are in Vancouver. I also have a technology hub here in Seattle, and we found ourselves having to shut down really everything. So we went from all open to having to enable work from home, shut down our stores, and figure out how to make that inventory available. So it required just, pretty much our entire technology team and our organization to figure out how to retool, make our distribution centers safe for our employees to be able to be in there and be able to keep the distribution centers running. And I would say also, one of the things that was most important was our leadership team came together and figured out our most important value was our people. So we wanted to keep, even as we're closing our stores, we did 100% payroll protection, and we didn't lay off anybody through all of COVID. We kept everybody on the payroll, which required a lot of other things, a lot of other budget tightening in a lot of other areas. And then we saw all of our guests shift from, instead of shopping in the stores, they went to shopping online. And you can imagine what that meant for the performance of the website, right? We had planned for a certain amount of people to shop on the website, and then all of a sudden we have 157% comp in Q2 on our websites, and it just keeps growing. So incredible agility and flexibility, and it's just been quite a wild ride for us. So I don't want to take too much time in my opening intro, but I think we could all probably write books on 2020 and the changing landscape of retail.
Thank you, Julie. Susan, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Susan Hollingshead. I'm the CEO of TrueLocal. TrueLocal helps communities thrive by supporting their local retail. Our technology and marketing tools allow consumers to shop at their local retailers by visiting one site, one shopping cart, making their buying choices, checking out, scheduling, delivery, same day, curbside pickup, and a few other options depending on what city you're in. My own background, I'm a serial entrepreneur in various capacities. I've been obsessed for 30 years now with kinds of businesses that can affect a C-level change in the quality of people's lives. So that began with brownfield redevelopment, went on to residential solar, and now it's a very keen-eyed focus on local retail. There are some amazing trends that we're following. Before I talk about a couple of those, let me just say the irony of all of this for us is that TrueLocal began as a twinkle in a couple of our eyes a year ago, August. And a year ago, August, our theme was, well, we're seeing this trend towards localism, towards digitization, towards consumers wanting the same efficiency for local retailers that they can find with a massive e-commerce marketplace. In other words, one place, all inventory, if you want to think of it that way. Never, of course, in our wildest dreams did we ever imagine the dark shuttered stores of March and April. And by the way, you talked about kind of 3 phases in the introduction. I'm not so sure there's not going to be a 4th shoved in there. I'm really worried right now that we could be going into a period that's actually quite different even than the last two cycles of shutdowns, where things are simply so dire that some of the more promising trends we've seen in consumer behavior twist, at least for a bit, because the numbers are different and the speed is different in the way that viruses are impacting us at the moment. But having said that, let me also say that for some time now, and I'm sure everybody on the panel would agree with this, we've been watching three really interesting trends in retail. And local retail is kind of, you know, the poor stepchild that follows a little bit more slowly sometimes than others do. But we're seeing it there as well. And we're seeing it in the retailer's behavior, and we're seeing it in the consumer's behavior. And one is, and the first, and Julie's touched on this, tech, fast-tracked by the need for convenience, safety, and speed. That is the number one adjustment that we've seen over the last couple of years, digital engagement. The consumer, no matter what their age or their location, has been forced to engage with brands for needs and wants on new platforms, you know, digital shopping online. Retailers have seen over a 77% increase in online sales year over year. And this year is mind-boggling, obviously. You know, whoever thought, when you think of so many people out of jobs and so many industries being very dramatically impacted, that retail would be increasing as fast as it has month on month. I mean, it makes sense when you break it down and you realize people don't have any place else to spend their money. But at first, I think it was kind of shocking. Target increased pickup sales by 60% just in Q2. I mean, these are crazy, crazy numbers. I mean, Sephora has stated that they had several days in the past 6 months that were bigger than Black Friday or Cyber Monday. I mean, basically every demographic has been forced to shop online. And 61% of shoppers are saying that they're using one form of delivery service or another. Quickly, and I won't go into the same detail on these, the other two major trends that have been there for some time now, one is conscious consumption, conscious everything really. Consumers seek products and brands that align with their values, and we see more and more of that. The one that's perhaps the newest and the least understood, but certainly is growing in all of the demographics that we see, is support small and local. In the US, half of people under 30 feel that smaller social communities make them feel safe, and they want to be in those communities and they want to participate. Pinterest searches for support of small businesses jumped by 746% in late February. So these are significant trends that no matter what happens with COVID, I think you're going to see continue. It's highly unlikely that they're going to shift back to a different state.
Thank you, Susan. Gautam?
Sure. Thank you, Keval. Hi, everyone. My name is Gautam Naran. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Gatik. So at Gatik, we are helping retailers automate their supply chain. So as a company, obviously, we are in a very unique situation where, we are trying to make sure that, our retailers, our customers' supply chain is up and running. And obviously, during the early phase of lockdown, all of that was very interesting, and experiencing that was truly, I would say, in short, brought everyone together, brought our team together, our relationship with our customers, all of that was strengthened throughout the experience. But, before I go into that detail, taking a step back, so quickly, my background is in robotics, AI, and machine learning. I have been doing autonomy for self-driving cars and robots for over 10 years now. Started my career as a researcher and then transitioned to self-driving cars. My journey in this space has been very interesting. So I saw the transition of, very early days of self-driving cars where, everyone thought that we'll have these vehicles on the road at scale by sometime around this time, right? We were supposed to get robo taxis at scale in 2020 and 2019, right? That did not happen, even though the field has progressed a lot, but there are still major challenges that needs to be solved. So when we started the company in 2017, we wanted to focus on applications that were more near term and something that would really solve a pain point for our customers. So we did not want to build technology just for the sake of building technology. We wanted to address a real pain point. So the category of the supply chain that we decided to focus on is the middle mile. So that's what we do. So Gatik focuses on autonomous vehicles for the middle mile. At a very high level, think of our solution as filling the gap between long haul trucking on one end. These trucks, semi-trailers are focusing on highway driving, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have these smaller, slow moving delivery robots. It can be the sidewalk delivery robots, can be bike lane robots. And then there is a gap in the market that we at Gatik are addressing. So specifically, we focus on light and medium duty trucks, moving grocery orders, e-commerce orders from distribution centers, warehouse to multiple retail locations. So essentially, we are automating hub and spoke operations for our retail partners. So that's what we do. And when I talk about near-term delivery and near-term promise of this autonomous driving technology, the key to that is we really constrain the problem. So when I say that a middle mile is basically a B2B play. So what we do is operate these vehicles back and forth like busy bees between these pickup centers to drop-off sites. And the idea is that by constraining the problem, we can get to the market faster and basically scale this solution. And then going back to when all of this started in the months of Feb and March, we saw a direct impact on our field operations, right? So Gatik is working with top retailers like Walmart. That's one of the partnerships that we have announced publicly. We deployed our trucks for them at their headquarters in Arkansas in summer last year. Since then, we have been operating 7 days a week, 12 hours daily, moving online grocery orders from one of their dark stores. And these are like, micro distribution centers, highly automated, non-consumer facing. All the orders are processed at this location. And then our trucks move these orders to multiple retail locations. So with COVID, we saw a huge surge in the number of orders that we were fulfilling daily, and then the number of runs that we were making between these DCs to the stores, right? And we saw these numbers shoot up to like 35%, 40% daily. So addressing that was the key priority. And because at the end of the day, the items that we were carrying were grocery orders. So everyone, we wanted to make sure that the end consumer were getting their essentials, were getting the orders in time. So so overall, what we did was like add more vehicles. It was an interesting time. Our engineering team was working remotely, so we had to transition to simulation. We had to, I would say, reimagine our infrastructure to make sure that the testing that we were doing on roads, all of that was not impacted. So I would say, interestingly, all of that has happened successfully. I would say that the customer's behavior shift is here to stay. Online grocery specifically, this segment was, I would say, growing like crazy the last few years. COVID has only accelerated that growth. And we expect same behavior moving forward as well.
Great, thank you. That sets us up for a very strong second half of the conversation. If I can open it up by asking all of you to just talk about, what were some of the key changes you had to make in your technology infrastructure up front? So I'm sure when the initial shock happened, you had to scramble to get some things in place that you didn't have the day before. If you could talk about what are those one or two technology changes that you scrambled for? Anyone?
Well, in some ways, our whole purpose for being is exactly what's happening now on a highly magnified scale. Having said that, I think there are two major impacts that we've felt since March. One of them is that not all aspects of our technology were as slick as we would like them to have been to discriminate between curbside, in-store, and delivery. I think, pre-COVID, in-store and delivery seemed adequate, as they have for most people. And this whole evolution, this tidal wave, really, of curbside. I saw an interesting quote from one of Target's investor calls, where they basically said, if you're not enabled for curbside, you're not going to survive, and talked about all the things they've done. So I think that's one thing for us. The other thing for us, most certainly, has been the need to speed up our whole launch process, because the need arose so quickly. We had this nice orderly plan into the future, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, can you come here? Can you please come here to our city today? And we're not at the point yet where we can do that fast, but certainly we've accelerated beyond what our original plans were.
I would add to that. So we did not have buy online pickup at curb before, but our guests told us that that was important. So we quickly implemented that. We also, capacity in the stores was an issue due to safety. So we worked hard to make it so that guests could return items outside of the store if they wanted to just return and be on their way, and then allow those guests who wanted to shop to go in. We did things like implement a virtual wait line, so that if we had a wait outside, they could just check in and then go get a cup of coffee or whatever they wanted to. So we just really shifted our priorities and figured out, all right, whatever we were planning on doing, how do we now make it so that we are dealing with this issue of capacity and safety in our stores, and also, one view of inventory, so that we can get inventory out of our stores to the guests instead of just, wherever we might have been doing before. So priorities shifted very, very quickly. And we're still learning from that. So super interesting times. Yeah.
Yeah. Julie, if I can stay with you for a minute. I mean, you obviously run a global multinational corporation. And as you alluded to, you saw this happening in China initially, and you could see it coming here. Were there similarities or differences between the consumer behavior in international markets versus the Canadian and the US markets? And additionally, were there any specific changes in the technologies that you use overseas versus here?
Differences in technology for sure. Like in China, for example, it's predominantly a marketplace. It's predominantly Tmall, and it's just a different world in China. In terms of learnings, we did take a lot of learnings from Asia. I think we saw the need to shutter our stores, or our corporate centers, probably a little bit earlier, because we were in touch with Hong Kong and we knew what was coming. And so we were one of the first ones to say, look, we should probably just start working from home. We had other things that we had to do really quickly, like we had to send all of our contact center agents to work from home, which is kind of a big deal because you don't know what sort of connectivity they have. We had a few agents working from home, but we would certify them ahead of time, right? You have to have a certain speed, you have to have a certain configuration. And then the next day we have 1,200 people working from home. And it was not smooth, right? We had to go through all sorts of hurdles to get them to figure out, right, is your kid doing Zoom at the same time that you're trying to take these calls, and what sort of bandwidth do you have, and or is it our VPN issue? So lots and lots of learnings to that, and some of those are global that you can roll out and some aren't, it's super interesting to just see the whole world go through these things simultaneously and then also independently, because every country is just so unique. that there are some things that you can look at and you can say, yeah, it's the same. And then so many that are just completely unique.
Yeah. And just one last question on that. Susan brought this up, which I think is an interesting observation about product development process. I mean, how do you accelerate that timeline when your customers are asking for it at a faster pace, but your organization is now highly distributed and remote? So were there any internal process changes or roadmap changes you made to accelerate product development in this context? All of you.
Can talk about it. Yeah, I think just to add to that point, yeah, our customers, they were asking us to deploy these vehicles ahead of schedule and more vehicles. And then at the same time, internally, we had a financing round and we were like trying to hire people as fast as we could. And obviously hiring new members to the team over Zoom is very interesting, very challenging. So how do you hire people without meeting them in person, right? So this was the challenge that we were faced. Overall, obviously, the team came up with innovative ways to hire people, add people, at the same time reduce the deployment period, right? So we were able to add more vehicles ahead of schedule by relying on a few infrastructure change internally. So a lot of emphasis on simulation testing, a lot of emphasis on making sure that our supply chain, our partners who were helping us put together these autonomous vehicles, supporting them in a way that they could support us, and ultimately we could help our retail partners. So all of that happened. But yeah, I would say ultimately this growth, this demand is again, it's here to stay, and we are still trying to add more vehicles as soon as we can. And but yeah, the experience has been amazing.
Just to build on that, I think if anybody had asked us in January if we could have our entire workforce work from home, including product development, we would have said no way. And then we just do it, and we find efficiencies in how to do it. So just like Gautam said, right, we figured out how to not just do it, but to make it better. And we have lots of examples of that. I'll just give an example of our communications with our team. We were in the habit of getting everybody together physically for a town hall once a quarter. And I hated them, and I'm pretty sure everybody else hated them as well. But it was just part of our habit. And now we get together virtually once a month, and they're so much better. They're just more dynamic. We don't prepare as much. They're not as exhausting, and they're just lighter. And so I just feel like so much of this 2020 has really brought about innovation through just the disruption.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most HR people around the world would tell you that human resources is going through a C-level change right now in everything that they do. Just quickly, in terms of our own experience, we had 1 month to be together physically before all of this hit, by the time we brought the whole team together to build TrueLocal. And so we have effectively launched as a virtual company. It has its pluses and it has its minuses. I wouldn't say what Netflix has said, which is it's just an awful way to run a company. I don't agree with that. But there are days for sure, particularly when you're trying to meld together teams, when you just wish you could be in a room together for a little bit, that you had a little bit closer interaction with each other. But we're all learning ways to get around that.
Great. Let's move into sort of that act 2, which is the here and now. And maybe Susan, we start with you in terms of consumer preference shift and how much of that is going to stay with us forever and how much of that is transient. And I think you brought this up, a very interesting stat that consumer desire to buy local has increased dramatically in this phase. And if you can talk a little bit about how do you see that evolving? Because I think that sort of the traditional conventional wisdom has been that Amazon has really sort of killed small, medium businesses and local. How do you see that shifting or not in terms of the post-COVID, currently in the post-COVID phase? How do you think consumers shop going forward?
So I think it's such a complex issue. I think, you know, a storefront, if you really look at it at a store, is a blend of impulse, leisure space, and warehouse distribution. And I think that's going to have to become much more flexible, because I think literally month to month, consumers' expectations of what that is and what they want from that. They want the leisure, they want the social experience. That's one of the things that's, you know, really supporting this move to localism, besides a lot of other environmental values and things like that. But safe is not going away anytime soon as an issue. So balancing those things, and I'm sure for Lululemon and everybody else, this is a huge issue. And it certainly is for all of our retailers. You know, when am I emphasizing what? When am I comfortable with the in-store experience? You know, when do I just have to, you know, enhance curbside and make it friendlier? I mean, this is just going to shift constantly. But I think at the end of the day, people are tired. They don't want cardboard boxes on their doorstep. They realize there are a lot of things wrong with that. They're seeing more and more of that be white labeled against the, you know, local regional merchants they thought they were supporting. How that develops, to me, is going to be just phenomenally interesting and opportunistic subject over the next year.
I think Amazon continues.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
They continue to set the bar for convenience.
Yes, I agree.
And that's both in terms of selection, price point, and delivery. And, you know, as long as that's what the consumer values for certain items, they're going to continue to win that market. And I think it's on items that are, you know, not necessarily differentiated.
Commodities, basically.
So, you know, there's a certain segment of people that, and a certain segment of products that Amazon certainly is a very formidable competitor on.
Yeah, I'll echo some of those. Yeah, I'll just echo some of those points. I think the big thing that we see is the end consumer's expectation of getting their orders in the next 1 hour, 2 hours, the same day. That's not going away. You know, I would say Amazon has pampered everyone, and I would say for the other retailers, they are trying to find ways to deliver the same service to the end consumers, right? And interestingly, with some of the retailers that we have been working with or we have talked to, their supply chain wasn't efficient enough to make that happen, to make the 1 hour delivery, 2 hour delivery, same delivery happen. And from a supply chain standpoint, we are seeing this shift where now you have to have a more distributed, more elastic supply chain. And all of that comes with an additional cost. So I think the trend that we are seeing in the industry is wherever possible, the retailers are trying to get close to the customer. And as you get close to the customers, the size of the warehouse, it shrinks. So if you're talking about inventory pooling or replenishing the aisles and the you know, stocking, all of that is important. So the number of runs between these DCs to the stores now has to increase. And not just from the DC to the store, between the stores, you know, inventory pooling and inventory balancing is a huge thing. As a customer who's shopping online, I want my item at that very store at that very time. And for whatever reason, if I don't get that, I have a disproportionate reaction to that. I'll go to a different site and order the same item, right? So to retain their customers, the retailers have to make sure that their supply chain is efficient enough to make this happen, to make it efficient, to make the same day delivery or the next few hours delivery happen.
That's why Walmart is interested in automated cars.
Yeah. I have to say, yes, at scale, automated vehicles is a good solution to make all of this service possible, so that the end consumers can continue to be pampered and make sure that they have their items in the next 1 hour or few hours.
It's actually a great segue into sort of looking forward and looking at this future, unpredictable, but we know it's coming. And Julie, maybe start with you. You guys truly have an omni-channel business. You have obviously the stores, which you own and operate, for what I understand, and then you have your digital presence. How do you plan to serve the consumers going forward in this, sort of in pandemic for next year or so, and then post-pandemic? What are the changes that you think will be permanent as you serve those customers?
Yeah, I mean, we think it's the same guest, right? It's the same guest that was with us before the pandemic. It's the same guest that's with us now, and it'll continue to be the same one. So, we have to be flexible and react to whatever they tell us that they need. We know that some of these changes will be here to stay, which is, the need for more convenience. We know that some of the behaviors, the shift to digital will stay, but we also believe that there is, that our stores are here to stay, that there's something that you can get from the in-store experience that you can't get online. So this omni-channel shopping experience is an evergreen sort of experience, and our guests can be in choice. So we want to just continue to offer the best experience, however they want to shop with us.
Do you think, on that point, do you think COVID is going to shift the mix of online versus physical retail for Lululemon, or
I think that some of the shift
is going to be the same approximate mix going forward?
I imagine that industry-wide, some of the shift will stick. And that's just Julie's personal crystal ball, but I think that's what we see with innovation over time, is that some of it sticks. People who, the grandmother in Iowa who never shopped at home, but now is confined to her home, has learned that she can shop online, and it's actually not that bad, right? That's a new behavior. And so that will stick. So I think there are new people who have learned new behaviors, and that will stick.
I think efficient.
Susan and Gautam, I want to give you guys a chance for projecting your future and how you see in your individual businesses, small local businesses, as Susan caters to, and then Gautam for you. And as you do that, maybe also talk about, what do you think UC Berkeley and this program can do for you in terms of technologies, or maybe you're hiring, whatever it is that Berkeley can help you with. So Susan, we'll start with you and then go to Gautam.
So one of the things I believe, and I think Amazon has been the first big winner in this in many respects, is that efficiency for the consumer is here to stay. It's not going to go away. I mean, too many of us work 24/7 jobs, two career families. It's midnight. I got to find whatever I got to find. The brush for the dog was yesterday, and I just don't have time. On the other hand, I love that local store. So I think you're going to see, as things ease up, and presumably we get beyond COVID at some point, a blend of those two things. You're going to see, oh, I go online at midnight, I find that brush, I know which store it has it, because I don't want to go to 6 different stores. And I might do curbside, I might just wait till the next day, but I'm going to use that digital efficiency to preserve my time, still recognizing that I'd like to go downtown and I'd like to interact with people, and that shopping is a social experience. So we're looking at that a lot. We're looking at how to help our merchants with that concept and evolve through it as we go in and out of these periods of COVID.
Do you think QR codes are here to stay, finally?
Couldn't hear.
Sorry, I was just saying, do you think QR codes are here to stay, finally? They were late arriving in the US, but as we all go out, every place I go now in San Francisco, there is a QR code.
I was just thinking that. I was thinking maybe people are finally figuring out that you just open your camera.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure that won't be somewhat demographically and age group bound, but yeah, I think they're here to stay.
Gautam?
Yes, and I can talk about, like, first online grocery. So I would say the increase in market penetration for online groceries is here to stay. We have seen that increase, the percentage increase from a single-digit percent over the last few years to double-digit numbers now, and that growth is just tremendous. So online grocery specifically, the consumer behavior shift, all the trends that we are seeing, the omni-channel behavior, all of that is here to stay. And talking more broadly about the industry, when I talked about the supply chain needed to be more efficient, more distributed, that's going to happen across the delivery space, right? Retail, distribution, 3PLs. We're going to see that change across the industry. Then I think for us specifically, I do want to take this opportunity to address all the attendees that Gatik is hiring. So we have doubled the team size this year. We're looking to double the team size again in the next 9 to 12 months. So we are growing fast and hiring aggressively. So we are looking for great people across different domains, right? Engineering, operations, business. So feel free to check out our careers page and apply online.
Yeah, can I double down on that?
Yeah, Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, same with Lululemon. We have a really amazing technology team, incredible, challenging career opportunities. If you're interested, highly encourage you to check out careers.lululemon.com. We have a really great team and would love to see some representation from this group.
So we've been through our current wave of that, and we don't momentarily have really, I think, more than one opportunity. We're still very little, but I'm incredibly proud of the fact that 2 of our 5-member executive team are Haas grads, and a large number of our staff are Cal undergrads. So, we pull some really quality folks from there. And in the last 2 companies I was engaged with, we did. I think the opportunity to be a leader in what I see as the next stage of entrepreneurial development, which is really what will all these things mean and how do we apply them, is a huge opportunity for Cal, because they have so many specific disciplines that are applicable to the changes and the way we're going to have to change the kinds of staff we're employing.
Thank you. I know we're coming up on time, so Ikhlaq, why don't I hand it over to you? I just wanted to say thank you to Julie, Susan, and Gautam, and I'm sure this conversation can go on for another couple of hours and maybe days, weeks, and months on. But really want to thank you for your insights and your time. And Ikhlaq, if you have any questions for us or thoughts, take it away.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, absolutely. I know this conversation can go on a long time. We could get a lot of benefit actually by going deeper into these topics. We are constrained by the hour, so we're down to our last couple of minutes here. Let me tell you a couple of things that I kind of picked up in the conversation, just kind of summarizing a little bit. I love your points about the high speed of acceleration that retail has been going through. I think there were some strong messages that retail is really a technology industry. And you also had a good conversation about innovation culture and about your ability to do these changes, people being able to make those changes happen. Got the point on localism, got the point on automating the supply chain. Loved your point on Amazon has set the bar for everyone. Having, that your customers haven't changed, but, and this omni-channel is evergreen. I thought, really good point there. People have learned this new behavior, and then finally it seems that you're ending up with this message: hiring is actually happening. Nothing has just come to a stop here. So that's all been great, and I would have loved to take more time to figure out like what that means in our programs here at Berkeley and things like that. I'll invite everybody on the panel to follow up this kind of conversation conversation. Be careful. You might end up speaking in a class or mentoring or who knows what might happen if you actually, follow up on that invitation. But we really do appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Nice to talk to all of you.
Thank you, everyone.